All right, and we are back here on the GSMC football podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we're going to talk about the teams that really surprised the most in the NFL. Now, going through it, I mean, there's not a ton, but there are definitely, big ones that you were like, wow, I did not expect that from out of this team. And the three that come to mind. So we'll start off in the NFC. So the Commanders. The Commanders are definitely one. I've talked about them a lot. Did not really expect them to finish with 12 wins. I had, a fraction of that. I had them finishing around the same as they did the previous season, which when I did a podcast with one of my friends, he said that might have been a little harsh, and yeah, maybe it was. And I definitely started to regret it because with them, I gave them a low win total, and then some of these other teams, I gave them 8-9 wins, and they didn't even come close to that. I was really bad. I was really bad at predictions this year, but hopefully next year we do better. I mean, playoff teams, most of the playoff teams that made it this year, I had making the playoffs, but it's just standings and win totals. Yeah, it was kind of rough for some teams, and this was one of them. Rookie quarterback. I've said it over and over again. Wasn't a big fan of the Dan Quinn hire. Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator. And, they signed veteran guys like Bobby Wagner, Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler. And, I was like, I just don't. I don't really see them really doing anything this year. But I did also say it depends on the quarterback play as well. And Jane Daniels was spectacular. He was spectacular this year. Cliff Kingsbury is the offensive coordinator. That worked out. Dan Quinn as the head coach. That worked out. It all worked out. And they made it all the way to the NFC Championship game, which really wouldn't have seen that coming. When they beat the Lions on the road, Jane Daniels showed a lot of poise in that game. And the year started off rough. I mean, they got blown out by the Buccaneers week 1, but Jane Daniels, he won Rookie of the Year, and he deserved it. He played really, really well. And Beal66 in the chat says, Commanders are real, good quarterback, great coach. Yeah, well, I maybe would flip that. I would say, you could say Jane Daniels is a great quarterback. He's turning into a great quarterback, and Dan Quinn is a good coach. And I did bring up, look, I know the collapse in the Super Bowl happened, but, got them to a Super Bowl, the Falcons. Was on that staff with the Seahawks when they won the Super Bowl against the Broncos. And the Cowboys' defense turned things around. They just had a terrible playoff performance against the Packers. So the guy can coach. It's just I looked at, the collapse and, the playoff performance against the Packers, and I was like, yeah, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Maybe it's Giants bias. Maybe you can call me out for Giants bias because I was like, yeah, the Giants are going to be better than the Commanders this year. Yeah, okay. We saw how that worked out. Anyways, yeah, they were a huge surprise this year. Give them a lot of credit, and they're not. They aren't going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be in the thick of it next year. Just got to make sure Jane Daniels stays healthy because he got a little banged up this year. He's got to learn to protect himself better. But I'm curious to see what kind of offseason they have because they definitely, for me, they should add to the offense. Bolster the defense, continue to do that as well. If they have a good offseason here, yeah, they're going to continue to be a problem. And then the other big surprise in the NFC, in my opinion, and the roster was good, but I just didn't expect them to finish with this good of a record, and that's the Vikings. Vikings finished 14-3 on the season. They went up against the Lions the final week of the season, and that was for the division, for the number 1 seed. And, yeah, they ended up losing that and ended up losing the playoffs. I mean, Sam Darnold had a great year. Those last 2 games is what everybody's going to talk about. Yeah, it was not good. Not good what happened there. But he had a great year. Kevin O'Connell won Coach of the Year. Well-deserved. And, now let's see what happens with this team next year. Is Darnold going to be back? Are they going to go in a different direction at quarterback? What's going to happen there? But you still got Justin Jefferson. You still got Jordan Addison. You still got this defense. So, we'll see what happens with the running back position because I think Aaron Jones is a free agent. So I don't know what they're going to do there. But quarterback is the big thing. What are they going to do with the quarterback situation? And we'll have to wait and see. But they had a great year. It just didn't end in the prettiest way. And then over on the AFC side, I think the biggest surprise was the Broncos. It has to be the Broncos. I didn't expect them to do a lot, similar to the Commanders this year. Young quarterback. And, not a lot of household names on the offensive side of the ball. They had running back by committee. Defense was still intact. But I just didn't know how Bo Nix was going to fare. And, with Sean Payton, he got better as the year went along. And, he was up there for Offensive Rookie of the Year. I don't think they have anything to be ashamed of. They ran into the Bills, who were a better team in the playoffs. Now, that playoff game got off to a fast start because you had Bo Nix hitting Troy Franklin for that long touchdown. And you thought, oh, man, the Broncos are going to be a problem in this game. And then they never scored after that. But I don't think they have anything to be ashamed of. Bo Nix can only grow from this. And this is another team where you got to continue to surround your young quarterback with talent. I like what I saw out of Marvin Mims, their young receiver. This is his second year. I think he's continuing to grow. Cortland Sutton probably had his best year as a pro yet. So, they only could go up from here. And the AFC West, man, the coaches in that division, you got Sean Payton. You got Jim Harbaugh, you got Andy Reid, and now you got Pete Carroll. And hopefully the division gets to the point that we thought it was going to get to a couple years ago when all these teams were making trades and signing guys. You had the Raiders getting Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones. The Chargers, they traded for They traded for Khalil Mack. They either traded for him or they signed him, whatever, to pair with Joey Bosa. The Broncos got Russell Wilson at the time. We thought, that was going to be great. Now we got all the right coaches in place because Sean Payton, way better head coach than Nathaniel Hackett. Looked like he was going to be worse than Nathaniel Hackett when, the Dolphins put up 70 points against him, but you throw that game out the window. Sean Payton really turned the Broncos around. They made the playoffs for the first time since they won the Super Bowl. That's been a long time. Bronco fans have just been waiting for that day. And how many quarterbacks did they go through? You had Trevor Siemian, Paxton Lynch, Teddy Bridgewater, Joe Flacco, Russell Wilson. I'm trying to think of who else. I think that's... Oh, Case Keenum. There's definitely more than I'm missing. Oh, well, Brock Osweiler came back. His second stint with the Broncos, he came back and then, didn't really do anything. But, yeah, I think that's the majority of the quarterbacks. But still, yeah, it's been a long time for the Broncos, and they're back. They're going to be a good team again next year, you figure. Another offseason, let's see what they end up doing. Like I said, I think they need to bring in another weapon. Maybe they draft a receiver. I think they could be a team that's looking for a running back. They could do that. Defense is still strong. But, yeah, those are probably the three biggest surprises from the season. I think all three teams will be in the mix next year, be competitive for playoff spots 100%. And we'll see if they could, put together an encore performance. But, yeah, there wasn't really any other team. I guess... the Seahawks went 10-7. The Seahawks or the Cardinals could have been that, but, they ended up not making the playoffs. Seahawks tied the Rams, but the Rams had the tiebreaker over them because of strength of schedule. I guess maybe the Chargers, because, how many people had them making the playoffs this year? I said that they could be a sneaky good team. Maybe they have the potential to make the playoffs. I had them at 9 wins. They got 11. You could put them in that conversation. And, again, they're another team. They need to add to that offense. They really do. Because, you kind of saw their flaws get exposed in the playoffs. Because other than Ladd McConkey, who was going to step up? Quinn Johnson kind of reverted back, to his old ways of dropping passes in that playoff game. So they need another weapon on that offense, and I think they're another team that's going to maybe need to address the running back position as well. I mean, J.K. Dobbins was solid for them, but is he going to be able to hold up for a whole season? I mean, he didn't this year. Now he was able to come back, but he really was. The Chargers really struggled to do anything on offense in that playoff game against the Texans. So, but yeah, those are some of the biggest surprises of 2024, and we'll see what 2025 brings. What teams are gonna rise up and surprise us next year, and we'll kind of have somewhat of a conversation there on that in the next segment, because we will talk about in the next segment who what teams have the best chance of going from worst to first in 2025. So we'll take a look at all the last place teams from 2024 and which one has the best chance of going from worst to first. Now, I don't think there's that many. There maybe is one or two. There's definitely one, which I think you'll all probably guess who that is. But we'll kind of make the case for maybe one or two other teams if they have the potential to do it. So we will get into all that when we come back from our next break. So for one final time today, and for one final time on the GSMC Football Podcast, stick around, and we'll be right back for our final segment on the GSMC Football Podcast. Stick around, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.